And the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Hello and welcome to the only independent news and opinion program where we chronicle two distinct possibilities, either the demise and possible extinction of the Homo sapien or the greatest leap forward in all of human history. One thing is certain, though, there is no status quo. This is the Daily Australian Radio Show, episode number 73 for Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. Hello and welcome. My name is Jason Olborn, and the person you can see sitting on the other side, her name is Nicola Charles. Nicola, welcome back. Wednesday, 2 days short of the Easter break. How you doing?
Oh, that's exciting, isn't it? Happy hump day towards a holiday. I've had 10 hours sleep, so I'm not going to take any prisoners today. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? There's a lot of stuff to have an opinion about while we can still have opinions. Very upset about this news out of New South Wales that the state education secretary, is it Muriz Dizdar, has said that they want to go along the same lines as communist China and ban homeschooling. I actually think that is a hill that most parents should die on. You know, I homeschooled and I just think, you know, and I tried private education via, what was it? My daughter got a scholarship and she came out of that. She didn't like it. And I've tried state school education with my kids and I found the best one was homeschooling. It turned out a lot more intelligence and they grew up really quickly intellectually. But to be ordered, because I find it strange. I found them really easy to deal with on the homeschooling front. And as long as you had a good plan, they were great. And so to say that we should just not allow homeschooling, we're moving into a world where other people in the government are telling us how to parent. They're telling us how we can educate our kids. And the reason they want them in state school, I believe, is so they can ruin them. So they can teach them all this stuff about their sexuality before they're facing sexuality. There's no more incremental anymore, Jason. There's no more, you know, you've got the phases, you've got the terrible twos and you've got the white food phase. And then you've got the phase where they're building their immune system and they're sick, and their little germ factory is bringing it into the house and they have to go through that. And there's all these phases before they get to have to think about their sexuality and sex. And they want to do it from the age of 6 years old. And of course, if they ban homeschooling, they're just fodder on that front when they end up in a state school.
You want to take on the homeschoolers, New South Wales Labor government. Welcome to getting in between a lion, a lioness and their cubs.
Yeah.
You tried to take us through COVID. It was the reason that my wife and I set up the website A Million Mums for Informed Consent. It was the beginning of what we did. It was the beginning, I suppose, of my media career at that point. I recall specifically watching the video that Mike Yeadon, the former VP of Pfizer, gave in early COVID. And by the end of that 1 hour interview, he was physically and visibly shaken. And it was very disturbing. I remember going to sleep that night and waking up the next morning and saying to my wife, there's two things that we need to do. We need to start a grassroots movement and we also need to attack Fauci from the top every single day until that man is taken out. And that's where A Million Mums for Informed Consent was born. Literally that day, we set up a Facebook group, we built a website. We had 20,000 followers within days. It was unbelievable. I remember Tony Nikolic at AFL Solicitors sharing it on various different social media platforms and went berserk. And I didn't know Tony at that time, but it was enormous. But the thing was that when we built the website, which we had up and running for about 3 or 4 years, the number one thing on that website that everyone went to was our homeschooling resources, which we'd collated a ton of information, and everyone wanted to know about homeschooling. And through COVID ourselves, my eldest boy was in year 7 in the first year of COVID, and I think he attended school maybe 6 to 8 weeks in the entire year with all the various lockdowns, etc. And then when he returned in year 8, and the thing was, when you think about this, he'd come from year 6, went straight into year 7, from primary to high school, had no touch in year 7, and by the time year 8 came around, the whole social structure was all over the place, and there was the usual cliques, etc. And this was a kid trying to fit in, and he got into some trouble, and immediately the school decided to go full on against him and wanted to expel my son.
Oh
So
my God.
we had to go through that whole process, and in the end, the school backed down and allowed him back in. And at that point, my wife and I said, "Yeah, well, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to homeschool from here."
Yeah.
Now, specifically, he struggled in a number of subjects. Couldn't pass science, for example. Sort of a quarter of the way through year 8. Bringing him home, and within 3 weeks at home, using the exact same curriculum, my wife tested him, and he got 95% at science. Now, what does that tell you about the school system?
Mm.
Now, he never was a particularly great student, and now he's in trade college and doing quite well there. And typical boy, he does what he does, and he's loud and he's boisterous, and he gets into trouble here and there. And he's found his people. He's a tradie, and he's interested in work. He's got a tremendous work ethic. He's worked in a number of different places. And the one thing that I think saved him was the fact that we homeschooled this boy. If he was in that system, I don't know what would have happened. And this was a private education. So my two youngest were, I think they did first grade and kindy at the local school as well. And we also decided to pull them out for the same reasons, and primarily because we didn't know what these schools would insist on behind closed doors. And so my wife is a trained educator herself anyway. She's taught at university, lectured there, so more at a senior end of town. But once you understand the education system and the processes, but you did right. Once you set your own curriculum, and you're invited to do that. Now, we openly embrace the homeschool state system, from the sense that we've had a particular educator come out to the home and inspect the workload that we've done, and it's all very above board, and there's no nasties in there whatsoever. Basically, they're saying you do whatever you want to do from the perspective of, you've got to do your maths and your English and your sciences at a certain basic level that you would want to do anyway. You want your kids to be able to read and write. But he said the main thing is to provide them with an equal opportunity of other extracurricular activities. In other words, an abundance of opportunity. And that makes a lot of sense. So it's one thing to say, okay, we keep our kids at home and we teach them the timetables and they become geniuses at maths and English, and therefore we've done a good job. What they're saying is provided other opportunities. So in the homeschooling community where we're from, in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, it's actually the largest in the country, I believe, certainly in New South Wales. Now, this is how good it is. During the COVID period, I can't remember if it was 22, 21, 22, whatever year it was, but the mums got together and created an athletics carnival, which no one expected would happen, and they got a field, a sports field organised. Over 300 children attended the homeschooling athletics carnival. Can you imagine that? Like, that's how well it was organised. Now, when they did the javelin, they didn't use a javelin. They used like a foam javelin. So I'll give you an example. But they did still running races and various different other events that they did. And it was a full-on day. It was terrific. All the parents were there, and photographs, etc. It was great. Then they decided to do a swimming carnival. Now, in this one, they didn't invite the older kids. It was more of the younger kids, and they did it in a 25-metre pool in the local area. And it was also a hit. There was about 200 children that attended on that day. There was no problems. There was no, they had whatever safety that they needed to do, and all the kids could swim. So I was equally as impressed by how that worked. So people ask, but are your kids, are they stifled in their social outlets? And I'm like, on the contrary, they know more kids than they would have done at school. They know kids across all age groups. And one of the great things about homeschooling, and I'm going to love to sit before the Parliament when they have this debate, if they have this debate before this lunatic education minister that clearly is indoctrinated by the Chinese model, and go to and explain the scenario. There is no age hierarchy in homeschooling. You know how at school you're in kindy, first class, second, all the way up to year 12, and you stick together in your age group, and you can be sort of lent upon or bullied by the older kids, and that whole process. In homeschooling, no one knows anyone's age. They don't care about anyone's age.
Yeah.
So you'll have 11-year-olds helping out 8-year-olds and 15-year-olds helping out 12-year-olds and whatever it is. And because there's none of this indoctrination in the schools, you don't have any fear of any of the untoward stuff, and certainly the sexual the urging of the sexual education generation of children that don't really care. And if you observe in a homeschooling environment, there is nothing like that. There is no urgency, and it doesn't seem to be the raging hormones that you would
What
have
is the
in school.
urgency? What is the urgency? We're talking to kids about sex. I mean, in my book, that makes you a creep, right? And one of the things people say is, oh, we're too scared to do homeschooling because, you know, I'm not particularly well educated myself. We talked about this before on the show. And well, where did you go to school if you're not particularly well educated? Oh, state school system. So you want to keep your kids in a system that you are openly admitting is responsible for you not being very good at school, you know, not being very good with the books. So it's something you really have to think about. And of course, if they're older teenagers and you're homeschooling them, you can also do that fabulous thing, which I think school really fails on, where you assist them to get one of their first jobs, you know, like a Saturday job or, you know, 1 or 2 mornings a week, you know, and you've got to teach them the value of money, how to handle money, you know, what it takes to earn money. Like, it's not easy. Unfortunately, we're the slave system down here in the real world. And I think that stuff's really important as well. And look, the first child that I homeschooled is my 17-year-old daughter, and she's gay. So don't tell me that this is all because we need to teach about different groups of people, you know, like the gay community and the trans community. She was extremely, and I mean extremely, uncomfortable from the age of 13 with how many lessons there were about sex on any front, whichever group they were talking about. And that was one of the things that we decided to pull her out from, because these kinds of things, these types of things, you know, it's like one size doesn't fit all. Children develop at different rates, A, and B, when it comes to something as private as intimacy and sexuality, I think a lot of children, possibly most children, are more comfortable talking to either a parent. For some kids it's mum, for some kids it's dad, or an older sibling. She has an older sibling, a sister. And it was her older sister that she first came out to. And her older sister wisely said, tell mom, she won't care, right? So you don't need schools injecting their state opinions on this stuff. I think the CCP call it the one education direction, right? And this is all collectivism where, you know, we're all just little drones and we all end up being churned out the same. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't think it's good. And of course, one thing they don't want to promote is individualism and independence. They're all about collectivism. And we know they are in China, right? Because they're the Chinese Communist Party. And what I find as well, as you often say, Jason, is the hypocrisy involved in this stuff. For example, you've got this Senator Faruqi. You know, I can say your name correctly. I'm not sure why some people struggle with it. That's their problem. I wouldn't worry about it. Perhaps they're not very well traveled in the world and they've not met lots of diverse people, but I'm British and it doesn't get any more diverse than spending years and years, decades of your life in London. What I don't understand about Senator Faruqi is this. Firstly, she is listed as being a Pakistani-born Australian senator. Well, I'm British-born, and I've been told I can't be a senator. So already you're ahead of the game, right? I wanted a chance at doing that job, and I've been told I can't have that chance, and that the full might of the law will come against me if I do try and do that. That's probably happening because they don't want someone who speaks as freely as I do and thinks while I'm speaking, getting out there and being in Parliament. But also the hypocrisy side of it, right? So you are paid as a senator, as a public servant. It's this thing again of being a public servant, right? Now, you're from the left, and apparently you believe in this collectivism. So that's a good combination, right? Public servant and collectivism. You're there to represent the people and to speak for a large group of people. But what I find with Senator Faruqi is she makes it very individual. It's all about her. And what she does is if someone gets her name wrong, I saw a clip where it was the speaker got her name wrong and it was a silly flub and it made the person look more foolish than anything else, right? It's a pretty easy name to say.
Thank you, Chair. It's Faruqi. Faruqi.
Yeah, thanks.
We really, Senator Fakui, do you have any other questions?
It's Faruqi.
Sorry?
It's Faruqi.
She's corrected you twice now.
Faruqi isn't that hard to pronounce. We do have some way to go before we stamp out racism, but it's quite frankly infuriating that we can't even get past what should be the most basic form of decency, getting someone's name right. Do better.
She said that kind of thing is racism, that it was racist not to get the name right. Now, that is her opinion. It's her opinion that it was racism, because it isn't racism on the surface. It's a silly old guy, getting your name wrong. But aside from that, you're paid as a public servant to worry about the collective, to worry about the public that you serve, not to worry about your individual feelings and your opinion on whether something was racist or not. And I'll give you another example. They sort of, they did defame me and slander me on the ABC with regard to my opinions on the Voice to Parliament referendum. Now, there's no ambiguity about what they said about me. They said plainly, one of the things they said was, among some of the lies she told, and then they didn't reveal any lies that I told. It was just my opinion, my concern about the UN. And they also said she's a conspiracy theorist, right? So there's no ambiguity there. They called me a conspiracy theorist, and I'm still deciding if I'm going to take legal action against the ABC in what would be a freedom of speech case in Australia. Now, with Senator Faruqi, there was no ambiguity. It was an old guy getting your name wrong, but her opinion was that it was racist. So we're not paying any of these senators for them to be an individual, essentially, right? We're not paying for your individual feelings and how you interpret conversations. We're paying you to represent the collective. And you're on the left and you love collectivism. But the hypocrisy is they make it all about themselves. But we're not allowed to do that. Again, this is this two-tier, right, of what's going on in the body politic in Australia. And it has to stop. And I had a conversation with my daughter this morning as well about, and she disagrees with me, but about DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion. My feeling is this, because I am, as I've said before, I'm a migrant to this country, not allowed to go into the Senate because I was born in the UK, a subject of the King, which as per the Constitution means I should be able to go into the Senate. Diversity, equity and inclusion for me is a rehashing of something in America in the 90s they called affirmative action, where they basically said if you want to become a doctor, particularly a surgeon, if you were a person of color, you needed to get only like a 20% less score than someone who was not of color to become a surgeon. And it didn't work out very well medically for the people of America, so they scrapped it. If I was a person of color, and, perhaps I am, I'm as mixed up as anyone else. I've got a German mother, a Brazilian father, and I was brought up in the UK, and I now live on the other side of the world in Australia. I would want to know I got a job on my merit, right? So I find DEI as a concept racist. And the reason is this. You're basically saying that people in minority groups can't get these jobs based on merit, so they have to get it based on their skin color or their ethnicity. That's a lie. Some of the smartest people I've met are from Asian countries or India. They go into technology and digital solutions and programming, and all of these government positions, and they're very good at it. So DEI is sort of saying, you're not good enough, bless, but we'll put you in because you're not an Australian. I find that very racist, Jason, and I don't understand why anyone else doesn't see that. My daughter doesn't agree with me.
I totally agree with you. It is racism. It 100% is a form of exclusion. Diversity, equity, inclusion, by definition, is the opposite of what you just explained. It's exclusion.
Yeah.
This idea of Faruqi is just it's mind-numbing as you've explained. And
why is she so upset? Does she love Australia and Australians? Do you want to be a public servant and represent people? Because I do, and I'm in exactly the same cultural position as you, and I've been told I can't do it. So A, I'd like to know how she did it so I can just mirror that and go into Parliament. But B, do you want to represent Australians? Because that's what our tax dollars are paying you for, not for your personal opinions about, you know, how people speak to you. It's odd. It's really odd. You can do that in your private life all you want. I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of opinion. But in Parliament, it's not really about that, is it?
Exactly. Well, I've had to spell my surname my entire life. Anywhere I've gone, I've spelt it Olbourne, and people repeat it back to me as Osborne, and I'm like, seriously, is there a silent S in L, or you know, is there a missing S?
A
Do I not know
Z?
how to spell my name? Like, people literally think I don't know how to spell my name. So
Wow.
so so
It's British, by the way. There's loads of Olborns in the UK. There's loads of Colborns with a C at the front in the UK.
that's correct. Now, never once have I said racism, ignorance, sure, but this Faruqi is simply a professional victim deliberately using sanctioned advantage to harm fellow Australians for her own advantage. And I believe it's cunning, I believe it's evil, and I also think that they will awake a sleeping giant. There will come a point where people will just put their hands up and go, no more. We have been tolerant to a point, but no more. The idea of screaming racism when something doesn't go your own way, is there's just an end to it. But once you call it out for what it is enormously interesting what happens in an environment. And Nicola, you know, and something that happened to me recently, which I haven't talked about publicly, but basically something happened, and a certain person who became very abusive screamed racism, and I decided publicly to call it out. And would you believe that environment, 100% of people of all skin color in that particular environment all agreed with me and said that the person calling it was out of line. So that is a really interesting test. But I tell you what, if I didn't say anything, the status quo would have remained, and Faruqi would have thought that she has got control. And so it is that we live in a world of what my father used to say, and my father's been gone over 18 years now, in a world that minorities actually rule. And he was right. He called it 25 years ago, and I didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah,
Then he
but
says,
which minorities, Jason? All my life, I've been called a POM in Australia for 30 years, and that's just part of it. My husband's been called a WOG for being Greek all of his life, a word that you're not allowed to use in the UK, by the way, and still is today. And you know what? We all came from somewhere. That's what Australia is, a big melting pot. And you find your place and you fit in. As you were saying, it's very much like going to school. Sometimes it's hard to fit in when you go to a new school or you start school. You know, sometimes it's difficult. And it's the same, I guess, culturally in Australia, because we're quite unique geographically, right? People come here from all over. And so you're coming here and bringing your culture, and we celebrate all the cultures here, particularly with food, and you know it's absolutely celebrated in Australia. So I really don't understand it. You know, these other cultures have had to put up with so much, and is it ideal? No, it's not ideal. But let's say for instance on face value, Senator Faruqi is right and all of Australia is racist. I know that's not true. I feel that's not true, right? That's my opinion. But let's say they are, okay? Well, that means we've gone through me being called a POM, my husband being called a WOG for being Greek since he was born, and he was born in a Melbourne hospital. You can't keep regurgitating this stuff and paying people $400,000 a year to come in and fight a battle that hasn't been won for the last 100 years. It's pointless. Right, because this collectivism you cannot control. I know we're a small population, although we're growing all the time, probably more like 27 million now. You can't control the thoughts of 27 million people. I know governments and the powers that be would like to, but part of being a diverse society is sometimes diverse opinions that you don't like, that make you uncomfortable and you don't agree with. You know, I've winced, you know, I've gone, ugh, some of the things the comments that are leveled to my husband, and he's running for the Senate with the Heart Party. And I cannot tell you how many phone calls we've had from the AEC and various people very concerned on how to pronounce his name, because like most Greek names, it's very difficult. And when we announce it, we want to get, the announcement correct and how it's pronounced. People make mistakes, right? You don't hold their feet to the fire because they've got a complicated name incorrect. My future son-in-law is Dutch. He's got a very long name. I don't think I get it right to this day. And he just giggles. These Dutch have huge names. And it's just a shame. I would like to see people in Parliament like myself, big ego. No, I would love to be a public servant. That's why. But people who love the country and love Australians. And I just don't understand why anyone would want to do a job if they're just going to make an argument for something that was probably not fixed for generations. It's not worth 400 grand a year. We know already, change the record. Loads of people are offended on a daily basis. People get things wrong. I find it humorous. The new Australians are adorable, the ones I meet, and they say my English isn't very good and my name is this. And I think, God, they're brave, right? Because if I wouldn't move to China and not have a clue what people are saying about me, and then some of them go on and do good jobs, and English is not their first language, and I really admire that. So can we please try and get some people to represent us who love this country and love Australian people for all their flaws and all their failings, because it is a diverse society and they're dealing with a lot. They are dealing with a lot. So give them a break. Do you want to be here? Do you love this country? And I don't see much of that happening. All of these politicians on the left that say they're for collectivism, they're just me, 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 me. Anthony Albanese is the same. I'm sick of the lot of them.
As a cricket fan, watching cricket over the years, my entire life, Indian cricket teams, Pakistani cricket teams, Sri Lankan cricket teams, you learn
they're good, aren't they?
But you learn the players' names and you hear the commentators pronouncing them. And of course, the same goes in rugby league and rugby union with all the different names from all the different.
Soccer in the UK.
Absolutely.
Guys from Africa with the Geordie accent. Why, man? It's that's crazy, right? That's nuts.
Absolutely. Now, the 12th man, Billy Birmingham, made a career out of making fun of people's names. But then there was the Wide World of Sports, where he listed off all the soccer players' names and pronounced them perfectly, and he said something along the lines of, and then he passes the ball to Smith. Is that how you pronounce it? He says in the gag, which was the joke. Of course, it was hilarious. But I'll never forget the Sri Lankan spinner Laxman Shivarama Krishnan, and trying to learn that name as a 14-year-old kid or something like that. And you wanted to, you were encouraged to, because these people were your sporting heroes and your sporting nemesis, etc. But I have Sri Lankan friends, and many whom I worked with in the TV era, and a lot of them would simply shorten their surnames, which that would be often between 12 and 18 letters long.
The Greeks do that too, yeah.
And they'd shorten them to 4 letters, and many people did that. It was just what you did out of convenience, but it was...
You wouldn't be able to do that any day soon with digital ID. There's no shortening your name, mate. You'd need 10 forms of ID to do that.
Well, or you just go and change it by deed poll and start again. But it's fascinating, isn't it, that you can play victim to absolutely anything if you are a professional victim. Faruqi is a professional victim.
It's a lot of money to worry about yourself. We're actually paying you to worry about other people, though.
That's right. And look, it is all forms part of the drama triangle, which is the three corners: the persecutor at the top, the victim at the bottom, and the rescuer. So when you are playing victim, but you're meant to be the rescuer, you've kind of hit the end of your tether. But that's the Greens in a nutshell. And she's a Green senator, and has been a state Green senator in New South Wales and a federal senator. But it's just extraordinary.
But that's not about the environment. Those comments are not about the planet. So what kind of green are you?
Well, this is it, and so they're called watermelons, right? Green on the outside and red in the middle, and this is.
I'd like to know who's funding these people. Who are the major donors? What groups are they supported by? Because there's agendas within agendas wrapped in God knows what. There's something else going on. You don't use your valuable minutes. Right. When you get to speak, you're on a bloody time limit. I would make sure that when it was my turn to speak, it was valuable.
Now, if Adam Bandt, the leader of the Greens, every election cycle, he comes out with a policy for renters, Now, this election's all been about home buying. But Bant doesn't worry about home purchases. He wants to have an inheritance tax against people who own a property. So he's appealing to those that he believes will never be able to afford a house, what I call the financial nihilists, those that are given up. But they still have to have somewhere to live. And it's not a criticism of somebody who can't afford a housing deposit and to get into a home. On the contrary, I believe everyone should be able to own a home. And I personally believe that we should work towards a system whereby by the age of 30, we all own our property, our dwellings outright. And I came up with a case using the iron ore discovery of the $5.7 trillion that showed that you could actually do that. I've even spoken to Russell Broadbent in great detail. So I'm not against anybody who can't afford a home. On the contrary, I actively work more than anyone else to do that. But for Bant to come out and say that if a tenant wants solar panels on the roof because they want cheap electricity, the onus will be put under a Greens policy on the landlord to then go and buy solar panels and put them on the roof. Now, if the landlord is going to do that and have to go to that expense, and these days solar panels, $4,000 gets you some solar panels on your roof, then what is he going to say? Oh, we don't want to pay for power at all. Okay, well, you're going to be forced to put a battery on your home, another $15,000 for a battery.
And you might not want that for danger reasons.
And that's the other point. But a tenant, seeing they have equal rights, etc. So if you're going to enforce that a landlord is going to have to go and spend $18,000 to make free power on the home for the tenant, and if it's a unit, you can't necessarily do that because it's in a high-rise building, etc., or whatever. You don't have your own roof space. So what's he actually trying to achieve? Is he then going to say, well, what we're going to do is just make the landlords pay for the power for the tenant? That's kind of where this is headed.
It's just to create new customers for solar, Jason, right?
Well,
because that's the thing. It's they know that it's only if you're a homeowner you'll go solar, and also if you're a homeowner, it's that old sales and marketing thing I was talking about the other day, right? They have to sell it to you. You have to want solar panels. So they're looking really to mandate landlords. There was this very funny, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but I'm going to try. It'll probably be the wrong way around. No, did you see that? That's Albo.
No. That's
Look at Albo as a Muppet.
Sesame Street
Anyway,
Muppet.
it says that's a meme. It's so funny that it just showed you that and not the rest of it. But anyway, Zoom is a funny animal. It said Kermit would never have put up with this. And it says, this is an Albo quote, 100,000 homes for $10 billion. And they've worked out, but that's $100,000 a home. Like, what kind of rabbit warren shoeboxes are you building? And then it says next to his head, building nothing for 3 years.
Yeah, exactly right. You make a very good point there because when I started becoming a property investor, getting educated in the first instance, at the time they used to talk about $800 a square metre was the cost of construction, but that was 20 years ago. Today you're looking at $2,000 a square metre for construction of a freestanding home, so a timber frame, tiles and brick veneer. So if that's the case, for $100,000 without land, you're looking at a 50 square metre dwelling, so that's 7 metres by 7 metres. That's a double garage, to give you an idea. So that money is fake. That is
Don't
not
do that to people. It just shows he doesn't know his numbers. And there's that famous clip where someone says to him, probably not approved media for Alvo. Someone says to him, what are the employment figures today? And he goes, is it 5.4? Actually, I don't know. You're the prime minister. You're not armed with the facts, and you're going out there literally dictating to people. You're dictating when you don't allow questions from approved media. You're dictating. That's how it goes.
You know, the one thing that sticks out at me at this point that is more obvious now than ever, and I'd love to hear from our viewers and our listeners, does this say to you that compulsory voting is now past its use-by date? That if we have a system that the people are made to be so ill-informed, so uneducated, so disinterested, so disenchanted with the system, why should we force them to do something that they will only be able to use their ignorance and disappointment to go in there and scribble something onto a vote and get out? In other words, if you removed those that weren't interested in the political system and only those that were interested in the system, guess what happens? You immediately have to improve the information flow because those people that will vote can see right through the bullshit. And it's not just me saying it now. Even Senator Rennick has come out and said he is in support of non-compulsory voting. Originally, he had a different viewpoint, like I did many years ago. But I've come around to the point over the last three or 4 years that I am totally on side now for non-compulsory voting in this country. Now, people will say, well, that can open up the idea of fraud. Yes, it can. But there are other systems. Now, there are other ways to do it. You could use blockchain, for example, to be able to for voting. And I've seen people provide me with models of how that might work to use a blockchain system, which would not only be able to guarantee the security of it, but would also be able to count it virtually instantly. So you'd be able to have a result as soon as you switch off voting at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock if it's in WA time. Bang, there it is, and then you would have your results in minutes.
Well, you're right. I don't like this 9 days of voting, right? 9 days. You said it yesterday, right? That's 9 days of fiddling, 9 days of being able to mess around. Now, during the pandemic, as an unvaccinated person, I had to diversify. I'm from a national sales and marketing background, let's say. I like talking to people. I like people. This is why I should be in politics. I generally like people. And I had to diversify because I had no choice. I had to work from home. I went into digital solutions as just a BDM, a business development manager, and was taught about webinars and online conferencing and online AGMs. I found the online AGMs the most interesting, and project development online. Now, one of the things that happens in an online AGM and also in conferences is live voting. Now, of course, there is the concern about security with all this stuff. And the reason there is a concern is because we can't trust governments. And there are worries about, voting machines. And I've literally seen videos, in America, someone was pressing, Donald Trump and it went to Kamala Harris. And then, of course, the other side say, oh, well, I pressed Kamala Harris and it went to Trump. But in these online events, AGMs, annual general meetings and conferences, there's live voting on certain things, right? So you could literally have it happen in one moment. So you could have anyone who wanted to vote in Australia, and I understand what you're saying, right? If you're not interested in politics or don't know anything about politics, maybe you shouldn't vote, because you actually don't know what you're voting for. If you believe a poster or a comment that's been made in the 14 days in the run up to an election, and you think that's the truth because you haven't seen the harms that have occurred in the years prior, then you probably shouldn't vote. So if you did an online vote, an online conference, and by the way, voting is not compulsory in the UK, which is strange considering this is supposed to be a Commonwealth country. We know that there are problems with that, but it's not compulsory in the UK. There's no fine. If we were all on election night online, and we'd have to make sure we could be online, and there would have to be systems in place to measure if a certain percentage of people were unable to connect, that the result wouldn't be valid, because that's not fair either. Once you knew that you had 100% connection update, and this is something I used to project manage, you have an instant vote. You would have a graph on the screen of it going up and coming down and all of the different positions, and you vote online and boom, you've got the result within 3 minutes, and that's who's won. Because I don't trust this days and days, and some of it's postal. There was a thing in Frankston where the postal vote envelope, the return envelope, went to the Labour Party headquarters. How is that safe? Exactly. I've actually got that here. Someone's actually physically given me that. So, we're not secure. I think it's fair to say, and this is probably, again, why they wouldn't want me in politics in Australia, I don't think the voting process in Australia is secure. And considering you will pay the price for that insecurity for years and years afterwards, it needs to be fixed.
Well, the other thing about the compulsory voting system is that many people vote in the way that they think the outcome will be.
Yeah.
So that they want to be able
for the
to
winner,
say
like a football game.
Correct. And it's not a football game, but that's what they will do. Like people,
and you know what? They have votes on it at work, Jason. That's why they do that. It's literally a footy match.
That's right. So that's the value of polling, and that shows you a trajectory. So, it's the idea that that you can't stop a juggernaut in politics. If it's going in one direction, that's generally where it goes. It's very hard for it to turn around. And so that trajectory is the problem. But that shows you that people will then vote in that direction, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's enormously concerning, isn't it? Because something silly can turn an election event. Like, I'm thinking back to 2004 when Mark Latham met with John Howard in the 2GB studios, and he was much bigger and bulkier than Howard is, quite a diminutive man. And he came over and he gave him this big handshake over the top like that and leaned all over him. And it was that moment that the election was lost for Mark Latham. You can almost trace it. And so something as nonsensical as that was what lost Latham the election. He was doing quite well. And we're going to explore that in the news, which we're going to have to get to in a minute because it will be tomorrow's news again before we get there. But exactly where I'm going in relation to the Murdoch press and Peter Dutton and the use of headlines. And if you have a chance, check out news.com.au for the headlines, the hit pieces that are coming out from that particular rag for the person that you would expect they would actually be supporting over there at Murdoch News. But it's a very, very disturbing scenario, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that ignorance is bliss when it comes to the Australian public. And you know it by the way that they treat us with this $5 a week tax cut or cheap fuel for a year as some sort of bribe to make us choose between the lesser of two evils. And in fact, they are exactly that. They are
Jason,
evil.
I've got a group of friends who messaged me yesterday and say they've bought a bunch of tickets to go watch a footy game at the MCG on election night because they're not interested in the results, right? They're all bad. So, I'm not interested. I don't know where they're going to put their vote, as it's compulsory in Australia. But they said to me, do you want to come? And it's like, I couldn't think of anything worse because I'm interested in politics and I'm interested in the result. So again, you've got groups of people who don't even care about the outcome. So it's very concerning. Look, there are large numbers and increasing all the time of individuals who are very interested now because they realize it's affecting so many spheres of life, your children's education, the economy, policy on migration, health concerns, very major still 5 years later. And these are the people who would potentially attend an online election night conference, an AGM, where you get to vote live. And perhaps those who are nicking off to the MCG shouldn't be part of that if they're not interested.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So I think we've certainly made our point there. Well, let's get into the news now. There's a fair bit to get through. Murdoch Media appears to have selected its next Prime Minister with a turn in its storytelling. Traditionally, Murdoch is conservative-leaning, as Rupert Murdoch admitted in the British hearings years ago involving the listening in on voicemail messaging affair. Murdoch explained during that hearing that due to profitability, they had turned conservative. However, in what could be deemed hit pieces against Liberal leader Peter Dutton, it appears Murdoch is playing for Albanese to be returned. In one headline today, it claims Peter Dutton made a gaffe that was a train wreck interview. He reported in an ABC interview that there were reports in Indonesian media that Russia was speaking to Indonesia about basing aircraft in the region. Foreign Minister Penny Wong has accused Peter Dutton of trying to verbal the president of Indonesia after he falsely claimed our neighbour had confirmed reports Russia wanted to base aircraft in the region near Darwin. However, Indonesia has subsequently rubbished any suggestion it would allow that to happen, but it hasn't denied the approach was made by Russia. So to call it a train wreck is a little bit of a stretch. In another further hit piece seemingly aimed at the sacred cow of Medicare, it has manufactured another story, and it reads like this. Anthony Albanese is plotting a new assault on Peter Dutton's Medicare credentials, accusing him of previously backing American-style reforms, including $7 fees for emergency department visits and pathology tests. Warning the reforms, if implemented, would have cost some families up to $800 a year. So that means over 110 visits for a family to an emergency department or pathology test. The Prime Minister warned Mr Dutton as Health Minister also increased patient co-payments for PBS medicines. That's called inflation. While Peter Dutton's previous support for introducing a new $7 fee to see a GP is well known, the ALP plans to highlight other measures he championed, including a new fee for fronting up in emergency with minor ailments. 10 years ago, Dutton signalled dramatic changes to Medicare to address staggering increases in health spending, including including the $7 fee for visits to the doctor. Pledging to start a national conversation about modernising and strengthening Medicare, Dutton warned the health system was riddled with inefficiency and waste and was doing nothing was not an option. At the end of the day, all adjustments to money flowing in and out of the household budget provided by government policy are simply redistribution of income and fall into ideological patterns of dependency or safety net, which are two sides of the left, and privatisation or self-sufficiency, which are two ends of the right side of politics, notwithstanding waste, over-servicing or over-subscribing as patterns where a co-contribution could be added is most certainly worthy of debate. Now, in breaking news out of the US, Dan Caldwell, a top advisor to Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth, has been escorted out of the Pentagon after being identified in the leaks probe. He's been subsequently put on leave. Also, nearly 20,000 IRS employees are taking up the Trump administration's second deferred buyout offer, approximately 1/5 of the agency, according to Bloomberg. Meanwhile, Caroline Levitt has said that the president is turning America into a manufacturing superpower again. Yesterday, there was a monumental announcement by NVIDIA, one of the largest companies in the world. The chip-making giant will produce AI supercomputers entirely in the US. A new report suggests that OpenAI is developing a social media network with a dedicated feed for ChatGPT's image generation. Over the past few months, OpenAI has seemingly made subtle moves in a bid to diversify its portfolio from just developing AI models and ChatGPT to the recently rumoured screenless ChatGPT smartphone in collaboration with former Apple design chief Jony Ive. As it now seems, the company may cast its net even wider. According to a report by The Verge, ChatGPT maker is developing a social network platform to take on Elon Musk's X and Mark Zuckerberg's Meta apps. However, the details of this new development are slim at best and in the early stages. A deal with Iran will be completed if it is a Trump deal. Any final arrangement must be set a framework for peace, stability and prosperity in the Middle East, meaning that Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program. It is imperative for the world that we create a tough, fair deal that will endure, and that is what President Trump has asked me to do, said Ambassador Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Now, the Joint Cooperation Plan of Action, more commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, is a 2015 agreement between Iran and several world powers to restrict Iran's nuclear program in exchange for relief of international sanctions on that country. The objective of the JCPOA was to verifiably constrain Iran's nuclear program and impede progress towards a nuclear weapon. However, the agreement does permit Iran to keep a comparatively small amount of monitored, low-enriched uranium. Thus, the Iran deal does not extinguish all Iranian nuclear activity, but constrains and restricts Iran's ability to obtain a nuclear weapon. There is a really interesting point here, and this is the nuance that most people will skip over in the detail that we're covering. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors will not offer a plea deal to the lipstick-wearing suspect accused of firebombing a Tesla dealership, and local Republican Party office in New Mexico, Attorney General Pam Bondi, also vowed Monday. Jamison Wagner was arrested over the weekend and has been charged with 2 counts of malicious damage of destruction of property by fire or explosives for allegedly carrying out the attacks. The 40-year-old Albuquerque resident, a member of the LGBT group 500 Queer Scientists, faces up to 40 years in prison if convicted of both charges. Meanwhile, Rep. Laura Friedman, a Democrat from California, admits that House Democrats are meeting every single week behind the scenes with left-wing attorneys general to employ lawfare against President Trump's agenda. The notorious internet bulletin board 4chan has been inaccessible for hours after a hacker potentially gained control of it by exploiting old vulnerabilities in the site and doxing some of the people. And interestingly, there are reports that they've found certain intelligence officers on there as well. Very interesting. That's a developing story. And a British anthropologist has made the bombshell claim that he has located the tomb of Jesus Christ in a secret chamber beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. Christ's tomb is said to lie alongside the Ark of the Covenant in a hidden double cave sealed off by a huge stone block. The Ark of the Covenant is a sacred gold-plated wooden chest that features in the stories of Christianity and Judaism, and of course the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is said to have held the 10 Commandments given to Moses by God. Dr. Paul Warner handed his evidence about the site to the Egyptian authorities, who were apparently delighted by this scientific revolution. The researcher has zeroed in on a particular tunnel beneath the great landmark called the Southern Passageway. He claims his surveys have discovered man-made structures beyond the final stone block of the tunnel, which he says indicates something hidden beyond. This is all reportedly backed up by photos and video footage from the deepest and most remote part of the original pyramid structure, which is carved out of the bedrock itself. Fascinating stories there, Nicola.
I wonder if this was actually one of the first DUMs, the deep underground military bases, or is it a new DUM? I don't know. He's found something and they're like, oops, God, we better say it's the Ark of the Covenant. Bit suspicious of that one, I've got to say. With regard to Iran, my daughters work for a cafe owner who, him and his wife are Iranian migrants to this country. He's a chef, and they are some of the nicest people I've ever met. Very, very nice. And they're very worried about their family in Iran. So I hope peace comes.
Can I ask you, do they consider themselves Persian or Iranian?
Persian.
Isn't that interesting? Most Iranian friends of mine are just Persian. They're completely separate. And it reminds me, see, my late grandfather was Russian, and he was thrown into a Siberian concentration camp and was there for 15 years because he opposed communism. So it's assumed that if you are Russian, that you are pro-communist. On the contrary, you are anti-communist. So and he was a dissident. So you can tell how the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Well, he teaches my daughters Farsi, and his wife's sister is there with them as well. They're most adorable people. The women look like these little dolls. They're so cute, and they are so sweet and so nice that the inhabitants of this village where this cafe is just can't get enough. Like if they close 5 minutes early, people freak out. Now, I want to talk about this AI and this screenless phone and this, that, and the other. Isn't it interesting how it's all called social media? And if you haven't seen that clip that I've shared about oh God, what's that fantastic senator that I sent you the clip, Jason? Josh Hawley in America. And he's talking about Facebook and Zuckerberg and how they're compromised by the CCP. I won't go into it. You just go and check it out for yourself. And I said the other day, Mark Zuckerberg is married to a Chinese lady, so we don't know what's going on, but I think we're about to find out. But this whole thing where they're called social media sites, right? And what's happening on these social media sites? I really do think this is an anti-human agenda, and I'll tell you why. They don't even want us to be us anymore. People tune into this show. We're both middle-aged, Jason. You know I used to be on television and stuff, but I doubt very much they're tuning in because they like the way we look. I think they're tuning in, well, for the opinion, right? Because it's rare in Australia on a news show or a chat show. I guess we're kind of a chat show, actually. We should rebrand ourselves. But they're tuning in, right? Some of them say they're tuning in to see my funny reactions to what you say, right? So that's a human reaction. What these social media sites have been trying to get us to do for a long time is have an avatar. And of course, the movie, the James Cameron movie, Avatar, played into that, right? A number of years ago. They don't want us to be human. Now, they want us to be human with digital ID. They want a facial recognition scan. They want iris scans, which can give you eye cancer, by the way, so don't do that. And they want your fingerprints. All that's really important for identification. But out on social media, they want you to be an avatar so you can make yourself, I could not be here anymore. Let's have a vote. Say under the show, do you want me here, my old ass and my reactions as a human being? Or do you want an avatar that's me 30 years ago? Because believe me, it was 10 times hotter. So you decide, right? I'll be an avatar or I'll be Nicola Charles. Now, what's interesting about that is that they're going to remove us from social media as humans. So it's becoming anti-social media, right? And I just don't, I think this is extremely dangerous. If any of you out there have ever seen, and I've got it on DVD because I've got it on DVD as like a research piece, There is a movie that cost a lot of money. I think it was $130 million budget. It did make 197 million back, so it made profit, but God knows how. And it supposedly has a cast that includes Anthony Hopkins. And the movie is called Beowulf, right? And it's one of these fantasy, old Danish kings and loincloths and flying monsters and demons come up from the ground and all that. So if you're into fantasy, and I am, but let me tell you, it's no Labyrinth. Labyrinth was the movie, right? But it's what they called it then is motion capture, right? So the actors wear these suits where it's all got these little LED lights on it, and they do the motions. They did it with Planet of the Apes as well, but then they put essentially an AI cartoon in old money character over the top. Now, if you watch the movie Beowulf, and the reason I bought this on DVD, because I don't have TV anymore, to keep as a historic memory, is it's the creepiest shit you have ever watched. Because what this is, it's got pretty girls in it, pretty blonde Danish girls. It's got Anthony Hopkins all fat and in a loincloth as a Danish king. This is human beings. This is how they want us and how they see us. This is human beings going through the motion of being human beings, but having zero emotion. The eyes are dead. It's like me talking like this to you, Jason, and that was very interesting. And let's get on to the news. And I'm very sorry that Anthony Albanese is Prime Minister. You see my eyes there where I'm not moving and I have no emotion? That's Beowulf. It's like the bloody snake from Jungle Book. It like mesmerizes me because I look at it and go, oh, that's what humanity would look like if we didn't have a soul.
That's so
this
interesting.
is a movie with no soul at all.
You looked exactly like a PlayStation 5 character.
Really? I'll do
When
it
you
again.
did that. Yeah. Like seriously, it's the eyes. I've always looked at it because I've always been amazed.
They're not
by
moving. Look at me. Like, it's
that-
creepy.
That's what you see when you're watching a I don't play the games, but when you see the videos of the soccer games, whatever, and the characters, and they do this sort of move where they're looking
And they're
at each
not
other in the
blinking?
field, and they don't blink. That's right, and they have this strange look, this soulless look in their eyes.
Avatars don't blink. I'm sure they'll program them to now, but it's not us.
Yeah.
Surely on social media, you want to see funny faces. You want people like, yeah, you want fun, you want reaction, you want emotion. Because when you remove soul, you remove emotion. When you remove blinking, which I do a lot because I've got allergies. If you think I blink a lot, people go, is it because you're nervous? Is it because you've got a guilty conscience? No, it's because I've got allergies and I have to put makeup on to go out into public. So my eyes are like, oh God, makeup.
Well, I'm sure I blink more than you, and that's partly because I wear glasses, partly because I have a fan going above my head, and for all sorts of reasons. You also want to keep your eyes dry. And I tell you what, sit in front of a camera for an hour, looking down the barrel of the camera, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? When you do this whole approach, as we do here, where we sit in different studios, and we
Different
want
state.
to. And you want to be able to look at each other, but if you look to the screen photo or the image of the other person, you're not looking at the camera, so you're looking away. So there's a real art form there in being able to do that. It's like when you watch if you do watch the 6 o'clock news and these people read off teleprompters, and if you really watch closely, you can see their eyes
come on.
moving across the screen. But in most cases, they're very good at it.
But it's the voice, never mind the eyes reading the teleprompter. The news in Australia, they go to newsreader school because all these different girls from all these different cultures and all these different states and backgrounds, they all sound the same. And it's like the CCP is coming and they all sound like this. Hello. So the news today in Melbourne is very much the same as the news was yesterday. We don't change direction on this channel. So if you don't like it, best you nick off.
Geez,
Like
you
they
sounded a
all
bit like-
sound like that. What's going on?
You sounded like Julia Gillard there for a moment. I almost
no.
fell out of my chair. I mean, you didn't get the strine exactly right, but that was a very good effort to
I
get
can't
that
watch
right. You
it.
are
They-
right. Yeah.
It's just horrific. And the men aren't like that. When the men come on camera, they're like, yeah, mate, I'm reporting from, the Northern Territory. They sound like human beings, but the women have been programmed to be newsreaders. And I'm like,
Well.
oh my God, you're creeping me the hell out.
Well, we hope that we don't present that way at all here, and we're as natural as we can possibly be, make as many errors as we always do, and at the same time to be able to provide as much good quality, high quality content as possible in the time that we have provided. And I tell you what, I think we get a lot of news in and a lot of chat for an hour. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think we should probably be going for 2 hours. maybe if we get a backer, let's just say, if we get a backer, we could go for 2 hours a day. And I think that would be good. And we could get into these subjects. We could get more guests on. So that's the plan eventually. But, one glass of water next to you for an hour or an hour 15, that's about as much as you're going to get. Otherwise, we're going to be on, vitamin IVs to keep going.
Well, there is that as well. And of course, the other thing we can do is start throwing in some commercial breaks, and that way you can get up, go to the bathroom and do what you have to do. It's kind of like the radio station guys that used to play Stairway to Heaven to go and heat up their dinner. These are the things that you have to do.
We used to do that. It was so funny when I had my radio show on Sunday mornings in Melbourne, which, less people listen to that actual real radio station than listen to us now on this show. I used to do this thing where I played funny characters in it. And one of the characters I played was Queen Elizabeth II, and she was still alive then. And I used to do this clip because we used to do this skit where she would ring into the show because she was I made her a Collingwood supporter, and she would call in and ask about the scores. And she had a bit of a crush on Jordan De Goey. I put that in there. And so that was my cue on the show because it was a couple of hours to go to the loo. And it was so funny. I used to, because it was Sunday morning, I used to make her drunk because it was Saturday night in the UK, and she was trying to get Philip, because he was also still alive at the time, just before he rolled his Land Rover, darling, to get her a cocktail, but he was getting ready for bed, and because he was old, his pajamas had fallen down around his knees, and she's on the phone call to the radio show going, "Philip, darling, do pull up your pajamas." And as soon as it went, and it was the Queen of England running in, I was like, "Quick, go to the loo."
Fabulous.
But of course, we can't do that on this show. So as a woman who's given birth 3 times the natural way, it is indeed time for me to go for a pee.
There you go. Well, on that note, we probably have to wrap up today's show, right? We've hit the big hour. We've covered a lot of ground. Now, we are going to go ahead tomorrow and obviously do the show as normal, but we've decided that we're going to give ourselves a short break over the Easter period and return Tuesday. So for all of those people that are expecting a big news coverage Friday, Good Friday and Monday, we're going to have a little bit of a break. But of course, if should something incredible happen, I'm sure we'll be able to get together and get some coverage. But let's hope that we can all have a terrific break over the Easter period. So we'll cover the news tomorrow and return Tuesday.
Yeah, if anything big happens as well, we can do our individual clips, or we can jump on if something major happens. I also felt that it was really important for people ahead of having to go out and vote to just have a break from politics and just enjoy their lives and enjoy their families, right? They want us turning around and looking at them and listening to them an awful lot. It's time for families to just turn around and look at each other and play silly games. We've got our games lined up, and I was in a post office queue yesterday, and on the shelf in the post office, this has never happened before, was a card game on sale that I actually purchased, and it's called Selfish. And basically you're all out in space and there's only oxygen for enough per one person, and it's sitting back in the space station and you're all floating around, and you have to be selfish and make sure that everyone else in the game doesn't get any oxygen. You have to get back. And I was like, that's a perfect fit for my family. So that's one of the games I'll be playing over Easter. But you've got us tomorrow. Keep sending in all the clips, citizen journalists, because I wouldn't have had that funny Muppet head of Anthony Albanese if it wasn't for you guys who watch this show. So thank you again for listening to the Daily Australian. To myself, Nicola Charles, and my co-host, co-producer, co-owner, Jason Olborn, we will do this all over again for the last time this week tomorrow.